Hello and welcome to Entirely English and today's video, which was created at the request of one of my viewers. Before we get into that, I want to welcome Dennis and Daddy and Mummy Vlog, two new subscribers. Welcome, nice to see you here. Give us some information below and let us know about you and what you're interested in. Okay, so today's video is on how the British government and monarchy actually work. How is it possible? We have the king, but we also have a government, and we have a prime minister. So who runs the country? Well, it's rather interesting because we have a king, but he doesn't actually run the country. And we have a prime minister who runs the government, but Parliament can replace him or her, as we saw last year quite often. So who actually runs Britain? Which of these three has the power? That's what we're going to be looking at today. The answer is surprisingly complicated, although simple once you understand it. And to understand it, we need to go back thousands of years to when the king actually ran the country. So let's go back. Our first king of England is often regarded as Alfred the Great. He ruled in 886 AD, and he called himself the King of the Angles and Saxons, although he never ruled the eastern and northern parts of the country. But his rule represents the start of the first unbroken line of kings to rule the whole of England. His grandson, Aethalstan, was the king of the Anglo-Saxons from 924 to 927 and king of the English from 927 until his death in 939. Modern historians regard him as the first true king of England. And the kings at this time, and for many, many centuries, controlled the land, commanded the armies, collected tax, and ultimately made the law. Power flowed downward from the crown, and very few people had any say in how the country was run. But over time, that absolute authority changed. In 1215, a group of rebellious barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. He didn't sign it out of generosity. A group of angry barons with swords can be very persuasive. But this document removed some of his power, and this was the first time a king of England accepted he was not above the law. He was not the law himself. And this didn't create democracy, but it was the starting point. It planted this powerful idea that the monarch's authority had limits. And so we move on. These medieval kings discovered something quite inconvenient. Ruling a kingdom was expensive. Wars, castles, royal courts, all those parties, they all cost money. And the best way of getting that money was raising the taxes on their people. However, raising taxes required a lot of tedious paperwork and cooperation. And so the king had to appoint people to handle that. And so he assembled nobles, church leaders, and local representatives to handle all that. And the meetings that he had with them to discuss these things, to set them in place, was the foundation of what we now regard as Parliament. And this Parliament, over time, evolved into the two chambers, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The House of Lords reviewed and revised legislation, while the House of Commons represented the taxpayers, the common people, and their interests. In 1664, tensions between the monarch and Parliament exploded into the First Civil War. Supporters of King Charles I were called the Cavaliers, and supporters of the Parliament, led by Oliver Cromwell, were called the Roundheads. The Cavaliers were royalists, believing that the king should rule with almost absolute authority, whereas the Roundheads, who supported Parliament, believed the king's power should be strictly limited. And the Roundheads were what are regarded as Puritans. They not only wanted to stop the king's power, They also wanted to stop enjoyment, basically. They saw things like dancing and singing as heretical against God, and they wanted to impose, and they did impose, the rules that that was not allowed. The Roundheads were dour, dressed in drab colours, believing in no fun, whereas the Cavaliers, well, to paraphrase Kingsley Shacklebolt from the Order of the Phoenix, they had style. After 4 years of brutal conflict, Parliament's forces defeated the king, and in 1649, something unprecedented happened. Charles I was executed for treason against his own people. It remains the only time in British history that a reigning monarch has been executed by his own government. So England briefly became a republic under Oliver Cromwell, but the experiment proved unstable. By 1660, the people had had enough of the Roundheads and their puritanical ways, and Charles I's son, Charles II, was invited back to England and restored to the throne, the time we call the Restoration. And monarchy was again the head of the country. However, the balance of power between Crown and Parliament was still unresolved, and tensions continuously simmered just below the surface for the next 28 years. It finally came to a head in 1688 with the Glorious Revolution. Parliament invited the Dutch Prince William III of Orange and his wife Mary II of England to take the throne. Now, this was a bit of a complicated matter. Mary II was actually in line for the throne. She was the daughter of James II, the niece of King Charles II. Part of the people who went to him wanted her to assume the throne and take power. However, her husband, Prince William III, would not come to Britain and defeat the king under those conditions. He wanted absolute power. So eventually it was agreed that they would rule together. Although Mary never actually passed any laws or anything, she left everything to her husband, William III, otherwise known as William the Conqueror. Aside from that compromise, there was also a stipulation made by the people who invited William of Orange to come, and that was that Mary and William had to accept the English Bill of Rights, which permanently limited royal power and strengthened parliaments. The key principles that were established was the monarch cannot rule without Parliament. Laws must be approved by Parliament. Regular elections were required for Parliament, and freedom of speech had to be granted to Parliament. From this moment onwards, Britain was moving to a constitutional monarchy. As government became more complex in the 18th century, a new role emerged, the Chief Minister, responsible for coordinating policy and commanding support in Parliament. This role evolved into the Prime Minister. Just as an aside, why are they called ministers? Have a look at the verb to minister, and you'll see what that role is supposed to be. Anyway, to continue, one of the earliest figures widely recognized as holding the position was Robert Walpole in 1721. From this point forward, real political power increasingly rested with elected politicians rather than the monarch. Today, Britain is a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary democracy. At the top of the state is the monarch, currently King Charles III. But political authority is exercised by the government, led by the Prime Minister. The system has 3 key parts. The Crown, as the monarch is the head of state and symbol of national continuity. Parliament. The Parliament of the United Kingdom makes and passes laws. It consists of the House of Commons, elected MPs, and the House of Lords, appointed and hereditary ministers. The government. The Prime Minister and Cabinet run the country and implement policy. However, the government can only remain in power as long as it has the confidence of the House of Commons. If it loses that confidence, it can be removed. In other words, the government governs, but Parliament ultimately holds democratic authority. Britain's constitutional authority didn't just shape Britain. It influenced governments around the world. Many countries adopted parliamentary systems where governments must maintain the confidence of an elected legislature. Even countries that have rejected monarchy were influenced by the British political ideas. For example, When the American colonies declared independence in 1776, they rejected the authority of the British Crown, but many of the political and governmental principles they adopted were from Britain's own developed constitutional system. So back to Britain. The monarch still technically holds powers known as the royal prerogative. These include, but are not limited to, appointing the Prime Minister, approving laws, both of which he has the right to reject, although he rarely does so, and commanding the armed forces and formally declaring war. But in practice, these powers are exercised on the advice of the ministers. For example, every law passed by Parliament requires royal assent. However, the last time a monarch refused royal assent was in 1708, so don't hold your breath waiting for the next royal veto. The Crown, therefore, acts as a constitutional safeguard and neutral referee, not a political ruler. So where does the power actually sit in Britain's system today? The genius of the British system is that it evolved gradually over centuries. The power is balanced between the Crown, providing stability and continuity, Parliament representing the people, and government exercising executive authority. Each limits the others. The monarch reigns but does not rule. The government governs but must answer to Parliament, and Parliament ultimately represents the democratic will of the people. After nearly 800 years of constitutional development, Britain's system remains one of the most distinctive political models in the world. Understanding how this system works helps explain why Britain still has a monarchy and why it functions very differently from the monarchies of the past. Unlike many other countries, Britain's constitution was not written down in a single document. Instead, it evolved over centuries, shaped by conflict, compromise, and political change. From medieval kings to modern democracy, the balance of power has constantly shifted. So who really runs Britain? The king? The Prime Minister? Parliament? Do you understand? Let us know in the comments what you think. Is this a good system, or would a system like they have in Russia and America with a president who is increasingly building his power and removing the government's power, is that a better system? Pop your ideas in the comments and subscribe for more things like this. Let me know what you are interested in and I'll see what I can do. Okay? Have a great week. See you soon. Bye-bye.